Hello and welcome to DM&D chat here on the House of Gamers Discord server. I am here with my good friend Zach O'Shea to talk today about well, I call this a tale of two worlds because I was really going to talk to Zach about one of his worlds and mine, but you know what? Zach has two worlds. So I kind of want to talk about both of them, give him a chance there. And I'll of course I'll interject with my own stuff here too. But uh, I so want to give Jack a chance here to talk about some of his experiences and some as he's been world building for as long as I have, not, if not longer. So I'd like to kind of get some get his experience and then get your questions on any questions you may have for us. So first of all, Zach, thank you for being here, man.
I'm just glad that I could be here. I appreciate you inviting me back.
Oh,
Always
absolutely.
it's always a pleasure to talk to you. So,
Yeah. I always the same, and so I guess we'll jump right in here. Basically, so I played in different campaigns with Zach and two different campaign worlds that Zach set up there, both Pavea and Wuthering, which both have a very different feel to them. Just for the kind of the for the people listening and now and in the future. Um, What's sort of that book, the back of the book cover introduction for those worlds here, because they are quite a bit different.
mm, yeah, they really are. They do definitely have some very big similarities because, like any world designer or dungeon master, author, whatever it is, you do always have themes and things you return to that you find that are very interesting. For me, let's see, Povea, probably the back of the book would be, kind of the heroes are thrust into a masked city full of intrigue, madness, and horror, where they're trying to deal with a ancient and arcane plague that seems to have no cure, and then all of the various secret societies and cults and tracking down the cause of that plague to get rid of it. Along the way, making allies, having friends, developing those sort of connections, living in a living, breathing world would be that one. And I've run that three times,
Three times,
once
yeah.
successfully, um, and then the other one that I have is Wuthering, which is it's actually started its fourth campaign, fourth or
Yep.
fifth campaign at this point. And Wuthering is basically I love Vampire Hunter D a little too much. I've got many of the novels behind the book up there. Action Figures, Bloodlust I watch at least once a year. The very first role playing game I ever actually ran myself was Gamma World. So it's always,
Wow.
that kind of post apocalyptic stuff has always had a place in my heart. That's just always been for me. So it's a, far flung, long after the apocalypse, gothic horror setting where all the various gothic horror elements are there, like if you're playing Ravenloft or something, but it's all twisted. The vampires are genetically created. The ghost might actually be like a manifestation of a rogue AI. Something like that.
Mhm.
One of the famous monsters was a nano swarm that pretended to be basically something like the Slender Man. So it's things like that. All those gothic horror elements are there, but they're post-apocalyptic fight, kind of that far Earth, after the apocalypse. It's not like Mad Max or anything like that. So
Yeah.
yes, that would be the two settings that I have run the most.
Cool. Very cool. I know you've run some other ones here, but those are the those are the ones I know we spent the most time in, and I got to play in both of them in various ways here, being part of that campaign that just wrapped up in Pavea. That was very quite amazing there. But I guess my question for you is sort of what was your inspiration for building these worlds and setting these campaigns in them? So I know you like horror and I like and that, but I mean in terms of like what grabbed you about these worlds in particular?
Wow, that's a really deep question. Usually it starts with artwork or
Yeah.
just kind of a general idea that kind of pops in my head. Povea, my bucket list place is Venice. I love Venetian masks. I collect them. So having to build a world in that, at some point I was playing with different campaign ideas to be like, hey, I want a game that is clearly Venice inspired, but
Hmm.
isn't, your typical Assassin's Creed or you know um, just kind of like a hard historical game. And so I went through a couple of different incarnations, in fact, of different ideas of like a diesel punk idea and like a far future idea and different things like that. And reading up on that history, because I also love to wiki surf, I ran across Povea, which is spelled differently, but it's actually the island that's right outside of Venice where they would lock all the Black Plague victims up
Oh,
during
wow.
quarantine.
Okay.
If you have
Okay.
Black Plague, they just sit you over there to die. So it was a pretty terrible place, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take the plague aspect. What can I
Hmm.
do with this?
Yeah.
And one of my favorite game series of all time is Resident Evil. So having something
Okay.
that's the plague that is kind of like the T virus, so you get a lot of different weird mutations and horrible things going on.
Hmm.
A big aspect of that is the Umbrella Corporation, all the weird conspiracy stuff, that looks good on the outside, but once you peel off the surface, it's something awful.
Hmm. Yep.
So that kind of all those started to come together. And
Excellent.
unfortunately, it became an allegory for what we just all went through,
Yeah.
which was a little scary when that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Being in the middle of that game while we were in quarantine or while we were on having to go digital was definitely an interesting experience.
yeah, exactly. And then Wuthering, I've always, I mean, horror is what I love. And my favorite
Yeah.
horror movie series, I mean, obviously, I just talked about Vampire D, but
Right. Right.
am still a big fan of Hammer horror movies from the 60s and 70s, which
Hmm.
I admired Vampire D a lot, which is probably why I really like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so for me, I was like, hey, I want to run something that has this feeling, but as you can tell, having run so much stuff, home built so much stuff for so long, that I really now look for mashups of, hey, I don't want to run this
Right.
straight. What can I add on top of it? What veneer can I add? And for that one, Vampire D naturally has that post-apocalyptic, but so far away from the apocalypse that it really doesn't matter. But everything's really weird because of it.
Yeah. Hmm.
So that's just was a very natural fit. And then getting to use my brain with the horror monsters to make them the same. You recognize them, but they're different because of
Yeah.
their origins or how they act.
Excellent.
So that would be
Yes.
the two inspirations at a service level for both of those.
Hmm. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. So I know. While there are similarities, they're so distinct in their own way as well. I mean, you have the city aspect, the political, the closest, almost I want to say almost claustrophobic nature of Pavea, being kind of trapped in this place where there's things out there in the world, but you're here, and this is what you have to deal with. Whereas Pavea is much more open world. Things are out there. You hear rumors of things and find different things happening in various parts of this strange landscape.
Right. As one of your fellow players said, Povea is just a mega dungeon,
It is, yeah,
even though it's a
yeah,
city.
yeah.
Um, and that's how I try to run it.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of the reason why they're also very distinct is the base themes of what I want to work on. Because that's once I figure out the aesthetics and once I figure out the setting and I
Hmm.
get kind of into it and it grabs enough of my attention, then I start thinking about the themes that I want to explore with the game, which I know
Hmm.
is kind of pretentious sounding, but I think
No,
that's
no,
what
it makes
makes it
sense.
successful is
Yeah.
to be like, hey, Povea is about corruption,
Hmm.
political corruption, capital corruption, societal corruption, body corruption, soul
Hmm.
corruption. Like everything has to do heroic corruption. It's
Hmm.
very easy in that game to start taking shortcuts
Yeah.
because you have a really important mission and all the choices you have of allies aren't ideal. So what are we going to do? You know,
Yeah.
um,
Lesser of two evils. Yeah. Kind of
right.
thing. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes the lesser of two evils is helping a person become a lich.
Sure. Yeah.
So
We'll deal
it's
with
that
that
sort.
somewhere down the road. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It sets up for
Yeah.
a future campaign.
Sure.
Um, Whereas Wuthering, it's much more exploration, kind of retreading gothic horror tropes,
Hmm.
kind of that also being very intentional with everyone has to have their story for their character, which is why I use Cypher for it, especially
Hmm.
with the second edition because of character arcs. To be like, hey, what's your character's goal? Let's make sure it's very episodic. It's like, hey, we have
Sure.
filler
Sure.
episodes, but we also have the Jim episode, the Bob episode, the
Yeah.
Robert episode. I know Bob and Robert are the same name. I'm trying to make up generic names, not to call
Sure.
out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
Yeah. So I guess then, 'cause you touched on this already, kind of how your settings evolved while you were planning them. But
Mhm.
did you find that their setting evolved while you were playing it? The things that you didn't
Oh,
think of initially, but all of a sudden, like, hey, this is great to add in here.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. The most common of those come from just having wonderful players, and they often. Sorry, I'm gonna cough. Um, they often come up with really fantastic ideas, either at session zero, which always use session zero, kids. Either at session zero, um, or kind of check-in sessions, or as the game is going. They hand you some really great character ideas and some really great background ideas, especially if you're asking the right questions that aren't 20-page backstories. You can do it in a page. You
Hmm.
ask very specific questions because they're geared to the kind of campaign you want to run. And they hand you some really great plot lines you can work with
Yeah.
around the big plot line. Or that's Wuthering. Or Purveyor's, hey, every week I'm going to sit down for 2.5, 3 hours, and I'm going to work up a section of the city. I'm going to make more shops and more NPCs that they might never meet, and they're going to glom onto the ones that they want to interact with.
Exactly.
And when they do, go, okay, those stories, how do they intertwine? How does it affect the large narrative? If it doesn't, then how do I make it affect the large narrative?
Hmm. Yep.
So it's always moving forward. And it's not. It doesn't end up being a cruise ship episode, every
Sure.
week. Where it's just like, hey, these people pass through. It doesn't matter. The Love Boat crew is going to be exactly the same next week.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
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 So that's
I,
it, it's just very important because it makes the world feel very lived in. And
mhm.
that's always what's important, either method.
Yeah.
So.
Of course. Of course. And then you have kind of, I guess, in a way, it's a blessing and a curse a bit that you run these campaigns or multiple campaigns in these worlds and multiple iterations of the campaigns in the world here. So, are some ways that the world evolved between campaigns? I
Oh,
mean,
certainly.
yeah.
Povea, and this is another really great tip for everyone.
Hmm. Yeah.
They can't all be bangers. More campaigns are going to succeed than. Sorry, more campaigns are going to fail than they're going to succeed.
Yeah.
But that failure each time is going to learn you something, whether you're revisiting that new world or stepping into another one.
Mhm.
And it'll let you see those holes that you've done, especially if you're doing your own world building. The first time I run Povea, part of what people had asked for that helped generate that game is that, hey, we love Bloodborne. And so I made a world that was very Bloodborne, but there was no one that you wanted to save. It was just like, let's just burn the city down. It's a lifeless shell of evil.
Yeah.
And like, okay, I need to
Yeah.
give it more flavor. I have to give
Yeah.
it more body, as it were, more people that you interact with that aren't evil, or
Sure.
aren't corrupted beyond the pale.
Right. Right.
So, um, so in that aspect, every time I ran the game, I would take the lessons of what I learned from my players of why they didn't succeed or what they struggled with,
Hmm.
and apply those lessons to the next time I would run that game. The more that I would do work on the city. And likewise, some characters would permanently influence the world itself. So we're like, hey, that's a really good kernel of an idea. I'm going to take that and make sure the next time I run this game, that kernel of an idea of what the outer world is like is there. You know.
Hmm.
Uh, Whereas Wuthering is much more. Every time a campaign happens, the world changes, and the next time I run the campaign, it's the same. It's taking that world, moving ahead 5 or 10 years, whatever it is. So it's still kind of, even if I have different groups of players every time, I have usually 1 or 2 players that have been in every single version of it, so they can see that thread. They'll be like, "Oh, that's really cool,"
Hmm.
But it players are so good at enriching the world and making those decisions, even though they don't realize they're making decisions to affect the world. Really good example is the Benevolent Protector that Jim
Hmm.
played in the last time I ran Wuthering, who ended up just completely sidetracking the way his storyline was supposed to go, which is great, and like becoming the overlord of a city and gaining a lot of technological power. That's in the next
Hmm.
version I'm going to run. That's just part
Excellent.
of the world lore. And I think, as much as people like to sometimes bash on Critical Role because you have those characters that show up again and again, and everybody goes,
Hmm.
"Oh, it's fan service of having the Mighty Nine or whatever show
Yeah.
up." or just skip my head. The other group,
Vox
Vox
Machina.
Machina,
Yeah,
show
yeah.
up, Vox Machina.
Yeah.
But those sort of things really enthrall players, and it makes the world feel lived in, and always progressing. And a world
Exactly.
should always feel that way,
Yeah.
as much as you possibly can. If you're running a long-term campaign, if you're just running a campaign book, it should still always feel lived in. But there's a beginning and there's an end. You're dealing with Strahd. Strahd is dealt with. You're done. That
Right.
book's closed, and lots of people move on to the next campaign, and that's okay. Stories should finish. So
Exactly. Yeah. And it's funny because with Average, I originally ran it with Zach and a number of folks here 5 years ago, and their number of those players have showed up and have been in part of the thing there. Not major characters, but people have interacted with. I see Bernie in the chat there. Bernie, this is Ironhar. Ironhar, that's Bernie the Amethyst.
hello, beardless dwarf. I'm here.
Yes, the bald, the cue ball dwarf.
So
With the John Wick style of fighting. So
yep. Which I
so
felt terrible about playing after a certain point, but
you know,
controller is broken as hell.
I know, but I will say, having been through that, I love it. I kind of like to lean into that a little bit now with like having those really competent characters being awesome at what they do, because it makes them it makes it fun. And so while it makes some encounters a little tricky sometimes, or it can mess up encounters entirely, there's always ways to make encounters better. And I've learned that a lot there. I know we talked about this too.
Last week, in fact.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So, okay. So I guess, another question, a couple more questions here, and we'll take some questions from the chat and everything else. But was there anything you found that was like unexpected or surprising during your like campaigns or world building, things you didn't think of that all of a sudden is like boom? I wasn't expecting that to happen, or I wasn't expecting to go down this route here. You mentioned a couple of things potentially, but any kind of standout moments, I guess.
The second time I run Povea, and everybody kind of knows the story that's in my group. Again, it's evil Renaissance. There's a lot of stuff going on that is not kosher and not cool. And the party needed to hide someplace on the docks. They went to a very expensive brothel. And fleetingly, I was just making conversational jokes about stuff that's going on. And on the bulletin board that's in the brothel lobby, there is a poster. And mind you, these characters at this point are like 7th or 8th level,
Yeah.
so they're not like newbies. There's a poster that offers a reward of 250 gold for a lost goat. And I threw it out as a complete joke, because you're in a brothel, ha ha ha, And the party was like, "Oh, what's going on with the lost goat? We want to talk to the person who's looking for that. Do they work here?" And I was like, "Okay." So it just became this like, I need to figure out what's going on with this goat and why this matters so much. And it ended up being that it's a little risque, and I apologize, but it was a noblewoman, and that was her thing, and she got polymorphed into one, but it didn't work right. So yeah, and she'd run off. She's some horrible twisted satyr thing now.
Sure.
And so figuring out the map of the party, which really was helpful, because I was like, okay, there's a couple of plot points they missed previously. That they just were like, hey, I'm not going to go this place, but it really would help if they knew it. So it was like, hey, the trail's going to go through these 3 places I know they missed, and then out to this other place that I know is going to help them advance the plot.
Very cool.
So eventually it led to the basilisk-like dragon that had turned her to stone when she fled out into the swamps, and dealing with that layer and getting the clues there. That's behind the scenes,
Sure.
Me going as the DM, hey, I need to help this plot move along. I'm going to use this one-off wacky NPC, because we all make them, to make the silly goblin people fall in love with, or whatever it is, as the trope is. And so she's using that to your advantage. So that would be one thing. Which did not show up in the next time I ran that game, specifically.
Because of that.
There was no poster there. And then in Wuthering, I just kind of mentioned the incident with you. a lot of times it just mostly for that game, it's what themes do the players tend to cleave to. Like they have their own personal stories, but not everybody's really invested in them. So it's like, hey, this game, even though the initial plot line I have might be all around a rogue AI, it's trying to found its own religion or something. But like the way the characters are made and how they're interacting with stuff, like they're much more interested in like dealing with evil witches and infernalist types. So that's really where I'm going to turn. Like that other storylines here, but like I focus on the story they want to be told, and it helps develop the world that way. So
excellent. Like when players glom onto something you didn't expect, it always throws you for a loop there, and so what's going to end up happening, and it just becomes an issue of can you turn it to your advantage? Can you bring this around to something that's going to be helpful to the plot, or they may just have a fun side quest. There's always that aspect too of like it may or may not be related, but at the same time they're going to have fun doing it. So
exactly,
yeah.
Excellent. And sometimes when you're writing, the same thing happens. You're plotting out. If it was a big one, or I'd be sitting there trying to figure out, okay, yes, I've made this fun toy shop or this fun candy shop. Why would you ever go there except unless you want candy? I need to come up with something. Well, I have dangling hooks over here that could lead to it. It might not ever, but it's there in case I need it.
Sure.
Excellent. So.
And then you have a big old Goliath who loves to chew on rock candy, and like that works around the bag of rock candy for a number of sessions.
Just want to chew on people, and that was very sad.
Yeah, luckily that never happened. So.
Yes. Remember, you guys never actually figured out what was going with the mead place either, with the other Goliath.
No, we didn't.
I'll have to tell you off stream.
Okay. So, yeah. So definitely. There's so many plot lines that they're just sort of sat there because we didn't have time to hit them all. So,
and that's how the world is,
Yeah, exactly.
That's another thing with both games is I'm perfectly okay with being like, hey, this is going on, or this happened, or you hear rumors about this, and if you never get to it, That's okay.
Yeah.
Because that's how the real world is.
Yep. So the players was determined to finally get this bank thing worked out in my game last week there, so they wanted to. Like from session, I think it was like session 6, maybe session 7. They found a bank deposit slip and then had tried to check it out a couple times throughout the day, but they kind of let it sit in there. And so, like session 50 something, they went ahead and finally resolved that. So, been sitting there for a while. So I guess before we get to a couple more questions here, I want to say. Current projects and future plans. I mean, I know you have a couple things that are up behind you on the shelf there.
Yes, I do.
Yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I am also a novelist with horror, which is not surprising. Thank you, Jim, for mentioning. This is my debut novel, Grease Paint, which is part of a novel series where they all take place in the same world, but not necessarily in the same characters. Just kind of a urban horror fantasy. If you like Buffy sort of stuff, it's got a little bit more gore, but because it's book form and you can't show that on TV. But I would say it's about the scariness level. It's not super terrifying. So that's out on Amazon right now. And then the other thing that Jim is also working on with me, as I just said, I'm starting my next campaign of Wuthering on Saturday nights. Jim is not in that game. Jim is on my Thursday games because Jim isn't available on Saturday nights for very good reasons. Yes. And but he's helping me in the background to get that worked up towards with a couple other people in our fan group to get that towards being something to market out to people. Now that Cypher's game license is opened up quite a bit. So pretty excited about that. More to come on that later this year. But that's always been one of my favorite worlds to run in. And I think it's one of those ones you can easily give people a sandbox to play in along with a couple of adventures, especially in the Cypher system. That isn't really displayed in the Cypher system already. I mean, it's kind of Numenera-ish his thing, but not really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks, Jim. I appreciate you mentioning that.
And at some point we talked about this, but are you ever considering about releasing Pavea as a setting?
Yeah, that one's going to take a lot of work. Jim took notes every session, and his was about the length of a novel by the end of the game. And mine is probably twice that big, so it's going to take a lot of sorting through it and figuring out what to keep, what to get rid of, what needs to be done, because it's really not. It's also it's really a sandbox. Yes, you have this is your quest, which is to get rid of the plague. You have X, Y, and Z that needs to get done to do so. But how you get there is up to you. And there's a whole setting to explore, allies to make, or enemies to make, depending on how you want you to do it. I've run it 3 times, and all 3 times the Medusa you run into has become an ally. Even though she's set up to be a villain. Because people go, "Hey, she's cool." So it's just really set up to be that way. And there's like 9 or 10 different ways to solve the main problem with those A, B, and C points, which you guys only got like 4 or 5 of them.
Sure.
Because you didn't need all of them, but there's lots of little seeds in there. So it's really figuring out how to present that, how to kind of whittle it down to be like, hey, here's a sandbox. But at the same point, don't be like, here you go, have fun, figure it out on your own as a DM, because they don't live in my head, which is probably a good thing.
So we're looking forward to that as well here. There's a lot of fun stuff there. Let's see.
I do see a question there from earlier that I would like to answer if that's
absolutely, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
So somebody asked, what's a greater evil if the lesser evil is helping someone become a lich? So the culmination of Puvea is the big central 4-story tower that's in the middle of town where the main merchant prince family rules from, sheds all of its mortar, rips out of the ground, and it reveals itself to be this giant towering roper-like Kaju thing that starts to rampage across the city at random. I just roll to see where it goes next. And they're like, well, we need a big army to stop that. This guy, if he becomes a lich, can give us a big army. We can always deal with him later. It'll be fine.
I mean, when the thing's running around eating all the populace, and this guy's got an army of undead, like a bunch of zombies and skeletons there, that could at least distract it, slow it down. That's what we're looking for there. So it definitely
character did. So around.
Yes, munch. Yeah, it's really grab, bash, swallow, and then fail some saves, and I'm gone.
Yeah, so
it was brutal, but we definitely learned not to mess with it.
Yes,
until we found ways to weaken it and deal with it. So
exactly, and that's the point. It's okay to sometimes introduce some stuff to your players they cannot overcome right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, again, Vox Machina Season 2, great example of that.
Yeah, so. And it's funny because I think a lot of DMs, and I've been somewhat guilty of that to a degree. And the idea is that everyone should be able to handle everything you throw at them all at once. And the problem you run into, and I find if you've run into this in your games as well, is that the players don't have the mindset of to retreat. Mm-hmm. They think that because it's there, they should deal with it. Yeah. And the idea that maybe you can't deal with it right now, maybe you need to do something else or back off and come back at some point there, is a mindset that's a little difficult for players sometimes. And it's hard to convey that as a DM, as my players ran into when I kind of set up for them for an ambush. It was the point where it was like this was supposed to be a no-win situation to set up the final confrontation coming up here, but it didn't come across that way. It was very difficult because the players are going to have that struggle. They want to succeed. They want to push through, and sometimes, I mean, they end up against something that's not.
Sometimes a character needs to die. It stinks because I hate doing it. But I mean, another really great example is the Sunless Citadel, which I played so many times in 3.30 and 3.5 when it has the Roper in the dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
Your first level party, a Roper's going to kill people, and that's the whole point is you need to either negotiate with it or run away. And every time I ran into it, that's not what happened.
Yep. So, you went ahead and just, go ahead and attack it.
Oh, God. They ran. So.
Yep, exactly. As Brady mentioned, the master of notebooks here. I mean, it's like there's this one, there's this one, there's this one, and now this one, and this one. They're all sitting here on my desk. So, I filled up this one. This was trees. Well, I keep these. These are.
I know. I'm being silly.
I mean, this was the original Avarice one from 5 years ago, and this is the one that here, and it's filled up, and now I have part 2.
Awesome.
So,
love it.
So yeah, it's keeping those notes is obviously a huge thing, and if you are in a situation where you have a player that's willing to keep good notes, obviously that's gold. I mean, you literally have someone who can like help recap, like, oh, I wrote this thing down. What was this? It was, what this is like a year and a half ago. What this? So it definitely was helpful there. I did slack off at the end because things were just like roller
Oh,
coastering, and so it was like
yeah.
my notes were just like bought this thing this week. Went in and found this thing and got this. So it literally so like, and the thing is that notes don't all have to be all encompassing. For the DM, I mean, you might have something somewhat improvised session of I have these world elements I built. I know they're heading here. I know these things are there. So let's see how they handle it. And so it all depends really on how much you have planned for that session or how much you planned previously.
Right.
And I know with Pavea, you had some of those things that you had monsters and encounters that you'd built from previous sessions even.
Mm-hmm.
And while they probably didn't go the exact same way, some of them
Nope.
at
Nope.
least have they at least have that familiarity that you don't have to like spend a ton of time on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever you can prep ahead of time, that's a great thing I find that a great thing to do.
Yeah, I always recommend, because people talk about you shouldn't write a novel, and you shouldn't. But you should
Yeah.
always work on your world, because you never know what puddle your player characters are going to step into. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you give them open reign, which you always should, even if
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes you're kind of rearranging things along the way, you should always give them open reign. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say that from this one here, I mean, there were things in this I never used. An idea that I wrote down and never used, or one that I wrote down like 10 pages into this thing and didn't use until like 6 months later. But I had the idea for it there, and it's like, oh, this can work in now. And so, yeah, I think finding that those extra places for ideas to build things out is a really helpful thing. So for those of you out there on the chat, throw some questions our way. I think
okay.
let's see if we have something out here. As a dragon there, failure is likely, success is fleeting. Talking about campaigns that don't make it. And if you're lucky, you can sort of wrap it up in some way, take a campaign that you had planned for longer, and then just find a good place to stop it. We try not to. I mean, it does happen sometimes where just like you just kind of like, oh, this is going to fizzle out, and that can be unsatisfying for everyone involved there. But sometimes it just doesn't work out for whatever reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, take what works and iterate. Yeah, if you get a chance to come back to that same campaign and run it for another group, that's a great thing. You have that initial work to build off of, and you know what maybe worked and what didn't.
Exactly. And you can make it better next time. So
Exactly. So
no one publishes their first draft.
no,
Well,
definitely
some
not.
people do, but
Yeah.
seen some
Yes.
books.
Yeah. I mean, looking back at my first two, I'm like, oh, that first one. Woof. There's some great stuff in there. There's stuff I look back and go, oh, I definitely should have changed that up. That did not work out.
When I worked at Borders a very long time ago, I had a gentleman that I worked with who is a great human being. But he and his brother wrote a pair of horror novels that got published. They got published by a major publisher.
Mm-hmm.
And he would talk about the stuff he would change now. You know, he'd be like, we had this scene where this happened. And I was just like, I couldn't write that anymore. I don't know why I put that in.
Yeah.
You know, they were horror novels, so they were awful scenes.
Sure.
Awesome, but awful. And I mean, I still think they're cool, but you know what I mean. Your tastes change, the way you think about things change. You know, and that happens in your campaigns too.
Yeah, yeah. It could be that something you planned for initially, just by the time you get to there, it's just this isn't going to work. I need to do this differently, or this thing I had planned just isn't going to happen the way I originally thought of. Because I mean, the players have gone a different direction. They've gone on to different NPCs. I mean, you never know.
You do never know.
Yeah. See, no other questions here yet. But yeah, so we've gone a little bit quiet on us there, but I guess then
you are. It's just the way it goes.
No. It's funny. I mentioned this before. Just in talking about the changes there, is that Avarice originally, came from the fact that I was running in Greyhawk for 20 years and I wanted to shake it up and mess Greyhawk up. And the way I did it, it just didn't work. I didn't like it. And the thing was that Greyhawk was so established and so big that trying to change it was just this massive undertaking that just didn't work. And so that's part of the reason why I made Avarice was I wanted to take a world where it starts off broken, and I can kind of tell that what that broken thing there, and then advance beyond that. A little bit like Wuthering, but not quite as it is that the the recovery process happened a little faster, and then grew into something bigger and better, or maybe even somewhat similar based on the ideas I have for the old world. But the idea that essentially things, because the outer planes have got so sort of occupied with each other that they didn't get a chance to mess with the world. So the world kind of like grew and recovered and rebuilt and sort of like turned into something new while they were all busy.
Right, which is good. You know,
Yeah.
I mean that's one of those fundamental things you can change about a campaign world. You know, that really changes the tone. You know, I think that's one of the things like why Dragonlance works in the original things, because the Outer Planes aren't playing with it. So when they show back up, it's a big deal.
Mhm.
You know, as opposed to Forgotten Realms where demons show up every week.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, they're just
goes out to use the loo and a nation falls. So,
okay, question from Bernie here. When you're creating worlds, do you take inspiration from books, movies, or elsewhere, or you just imagine up all these new places and people in your heads? I'm going to say, for me at least, and I mean, you're taking this too. It kind of column A, column B. I obviously many of my interests are inspired from the books and movies that I watched as a kid, and that I still love to watch now. But then it kind of takes over, and a lot of like with Avarice, where I took this idea and then went, you know what? I want to put my own spin on it. I want to do something different than other people have done, and so you basically come up with imagining the new people and places that make up the world that you're creating that's different, essentially. Yeah.
I always advise rip off what you love first when you're making your own worlds. They shouldn't be pound for pound the same exact thing. But, you know, one of the very first campaigns that I really was able to run to fruition, way back when I was younger and thinner, less gray hair, was, you know, a Changing the Dreaming campaign that was blatantly Final Fantasy Tactics. You know, change some of the names, but that's blatantly the plot that I used. So don't be afraid to be like, you know what, I really want to run a game that's like John Wick, you know, or so I'm gonna rip off some stuff from that, or I really want to run a game that is Harry Potter or
Ocean's 11 or
Ocean's 11, you know, or any other movie that you love or book series that you love. Don't be afraid to do that when you're getting started. Make sure your players know that first off. You know, so they're not being like, "Hey, wait a second." You know, they're engaged, especially if they like the same media. But let them know it's going to be different. You know, that you're going to have your own world, and then it starts to evolve on its own. You know, then you don't have to have John Wick. You don't have to have Winston. You can kind of go, okay, this is the world. I'm going to play with it in some of the same themes, and I can change names and things are going to develop along the way. But you know, you're going to find parts that you really enjoyed of the book that never got fleshed out, or the series that never got fleshed out, and that's the rabbit hole now you go down. So like, well, what would have happened if they would have gone this track? And then your imagination takes over. So don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah, it turned into almost an alternate world version of that world that you love. So I think, I want to say, because I think a lot of times, you mentioned there, like letting your players know this is inspired by. Because a lot of times, especially if they also love these things, and a lot of times your friends will have similar interests. You hope usually, but not always. But at least the idea of like saying this is similar to this, or it has this kind of a feel, or it's set in a world similar to this world, and then be able to go from there as they do things and they recognize some things. They at least can almost picture it because they've experienced it as well. So having that common experience kind of helps drive the campaign, helps drive that world, that setting that you're trying to go for.
Well,
and
You Well, that's why sometimes, if that's what you like, run in an established campaign world. Even if you aren't running an established adventure, you just mentioned you ran Greyhawk for a long time.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
people sit down for a Greyhawk game, they know what to expect from a Greyhawk game.
Mm-hmm.
You sit down for Forgotten Realms, you know what to expect. You sit down for Ravenloft, you know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid to do that as well. To just
Yeah.
use an established world, but make your own story.
Yeah.
Eventually, you get to the point where you do both, and then
Yeah.
you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is a chaotic mess. It lasts 5 sessions, and then it burns.
Yep.
And then do it again, and it's going to last 6 sessions, and then it's going to burn.
Yep.
Do it again, it lasts 3 sessions, and then you get to the point where it's lasting a couple of years. And you're like, whoa.
Wow, that happened.
You know, it's okay to fail, is basically what I want to communicate, especially with brewing.
Well, I think too, because one of the it's almost an advantage in some ways is that when we were first starting off playing and running and all that, I mean, we had modules. Like the module was like, this will last you for maybe 3 or 4 sessions, and if you want to, you can say, okay, well, here's each module had a little plot hook on like how you got to know that this adventure was there. Somebody came and asked for you. You heard rumors about a problem in an area. You're just traveling adventurers who stumble across something. Whatever it is, each module had its hook to get you there, which you could then modify, of course. But a lot of times, what I was doing was literally stringing together modules of like, this module was meant for levels 3 to 5. This one was like levels 5 to 7. This one was for 9 to 12. And so, and you maybe have some little filler things in between, but it lets you sort of like, here's your adventure, as opposed to now where it's like, here's an entire campaign. It's supposed to take you from 1 to 12 or 9 to 14 or whatever it happens to be. But it's a full plot that's all laid out for you, which, I mean, is good, but it's also, I mean, having the freedom to do something else with it is good too.
It is. You know, having read many of the 5e books, some of them are really great because they give a lot of free form and a lot of move around, and some are not.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that all has to do with exactly what you're kind of talking about.
Yeah.
You have to have that freedom. You have to have that investment in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, modules are also not a bad way to start.
Yeah, yeah. Effectively, they're not quite one shots, but they're not full campaigns.
Yeah,
like it ends up being almost like a mini campaign. You have your start, you have your finish, and then if things want to continue from that point, you have the freedom to do so. But at least for that few sessions, you can just, we're going to run through this dungeon, we're going to run through this like adventure that takes place in this weird place. It's a lot of fun that way.
Yeah, so. And if you're homebrewing, your adventures should also be separated that way. I would say if you look at Povea when we were running, you can see the module parts. Yeah, there was lots of freeform, but there's definite. This is a part. This is a part. This is a part. Same with Wuthering. This is a part. This is a part. This is a part.
Absolutely,
because it gives. You have to have those closures. There's chapter closures. But I think we have other questions.
Yeah. Another one from Dragon here. Have your players ever been hesitant to go back to a world they love that you created because they're worried the sequel will tarnish the original campaign?
No. It's honestly almost always the opposite. I go, I don't have an idea for that world. I just don't anymore. That story's done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can jump back into it. I'm trying to come up with something to make you guys happy. And then sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not. Like any other campaign. But I'll often just sit there and think, okay, what do I have? Do I have anything? And if so, I'll do it. And if not, I'm not gonna. Same with the end of campaigns. Povea is a really good example. You could all keep playing in that world. There's plenty of stuff left to do for 12 level characters in that city now.
Sure.
But I'm done with the story I want to tell at this time. So I'm not going to press it because I've learned over many, many failures that when I press it and it's not the story I want to tell, or it's not the world I want to invest in right now, it's going to fall apart in 5 or 6 sessions, and I'm going to be miserable.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think I haven't had the opportunity yet, to really do that a lot. Where I've had multiple campaigns, multiple players. So I kind of do it in my old days with Greyhawk because I wasn't really doing like full long running campaigns. I had one in college that ran about 4 years or so, but it wasn't like every week. But that one ran for quite a while, and it was a lot of module hopping, dungeon hopping, and just adventure of the week kind of things that kind of grew into adventures of the month kind of thing as And this
They
session took
always do.
multiple sessions.
Yeah.
Um, but it was more on. I've always found it was more on the lines of like I have this thing. Who wants to jump in? Who's ready to go? And I don't think that really had is where people were not wanting to go back.
Hmm.
I think the one thing that was a campaign that was it was the evil campaign that I did in Greyhawk,
I
where
heard
basically the
about that
players,
times from other
yeah,
people.
yeah, so yeah, the players all being evil, it wasn't something you really go back to. They accomplished their goal, the campaign ended, and so it wasn't that I really needed to go back to it's and delve into again. And about that is when I started to kind of play with other ideas and different things here. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, it was interesting to see what people were into and what people were thinking here. Now, I mean, I have a new group, new games. I've got my teenager game on Sunday, which is a giant open world sandbox of where do you want to go? Here's a map. What looks fun to you? And they're just off and running to different things. They're checking things out. Um, but with Avarice, we've been running it for over a year now, and we've been streaming for over a year too, which is kind of cool there.
There's
But yeah,
nothing better than a DM to hear that you give people nightmares and make them cry.
yes,
Um, at least as a horror DM.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I mean that in the most facetious, joking way I can, but it is
yeah.
always satisfying when you get a real emotional reaction from a player.
Yeah, and people are invested. I mean, it's that investment that really drives what we do and what we want to continue with. It's like if nobody cares, if nobody's like, well, I don't know, what do you want to do? It makes it hard to really push forward with a story and kind of figure out where things are going.
Well, you end up
Um,
spending 2 sessions in a diner, which happened
True.
to one of my friends' campaigns when we just were like, well, we don't have any motivation, and
Yeah,
that wasn't his fault. That was as much our fault too, you know.
yeah.
So yeah,
It's definitely a blessing to have players who have ideas who are, and I think part of that I've learned too is those side quests, those plot hooks that are dangling there, when the players have a chance to kind of go back through that and go, "Oh, we never did find out what that thing. We should go look into that," or is this related to something bigger that we've missed before, or is this something we have to go deal with in the future? Um,
the answer is always yes.
yes, always
They're
assume
whether or
it's
not.
related, even if it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
Yeah, but it's always assumed it's going to be important at some point. Or at least helpful or useful. I know I have in Everest, I've got players who want to go off on a dungeon crawl, and at some point, I know what's going to happen, but it's a matter of prepping for it and really making sure that people have a chance to get what they want to have done. But that thing is still sitting there waiting for them. Like there's that they've known about it for a while, but there's all this other stuff to deal with. When is that time going to be good to go for it? And
yeah.
so,
Being figuring out timers in a game is always really difficult
yeah.
because you need to let players explore the world, but also create a sense of urgency. And you can do it really poorly sometimes. You can have the meteor that's falling in Final Fantasy VII that takes 30 hours. But you can have the opposite effect where your players know something terrible is going to happen, but they get distracted by something else, and then that terrible thing happens, and now they're upset because they're like, well, you threw this other plot hook to us.
Yeah.
So you just always have to be really careful. It's a balancing act, and you're going to screw up.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to be like, okay, screwed up, move on.
Yeah. Well, and it's why I mean, it's why in Pavea we have plot lines we didn't get to because we saw the writing on the wall that the bad things were coming. We couldn't just let it not go, and so
Mm-hmm.
once we started the boulder rolling, we had to keep running with it because yeah, you kind of get the, and it's it's always tricky to keep that in mind with the players. So that yes, they put this thing into motion, and you don't want them to just forget about it, let it roll to a stop, or let it bulldoze everything. So they have to kind of keep up with it and finding a way to keep them motivated where you're headed.
Right, which is oftentimes just deciding not to give plot hooks.
Yeah,
Like, hey, I know I had something planned here, and you're going to find out something really cool about these rats, but instead they run away, and you guys keep on the main thing that you want to do.
yeah,
So you don't get distracted. And again, that's a skill. That's something you develop over time.
yeah, yeah.
We're
Excellent.
wrapping up, I think.
Yeah, I think we're just about done here. One more question if you have a question out there.
While we're waiting,
Uh,
can I say something?
absolutely.
Another PSA to the group that's listening. Please always, as part of world building, and especially the type that we're talking about, where it's really whole cloth stuff, always give your DM honest feedback. Be kind with your critical criticisms and be glowing with your feedback, but being like, hey, this didn't work. Or,
Mhm.
hey, I have an idea. We'd love to hear that. Even if it's just a one off. In Povea, it just seems like all the pigeons are rat with wings. What if they're actually rats with wings? Boom, guess what happened? They're actually rats with wings.
Sure.
So don't be afraid. In fact, I encourage you because it's only going to make the game richer. And if your DM is offended by that, have a serious conversation with them of why
Hmm.
they're offended. Unless you're being a jerk. Unless you're like, hey, Jim, your game fucking sucks, and this is why. Sorry, I dropped that bomb, but you know what I'm saying. I don't know how
Sure.
family
Yeah.
this is. So, um, you know,
Usually. Yeah.
I don't want to get canceled. So yeah,
Yeah. Exactly. Like as a player, please, yeah, DMs we always as a DM, we always appreciate that feedback and that honest criticism because we're going to learn from it. We're going to grow with it. So it is very very important there. And when the DM asks for you, don't hold back. I mean, let's see what's working, what's not working, and make things better. And if the DM can make the change, and usually we can, then it's going to be a better experience for everybody involved there. Um, uh, um, Dre has screwed up pacing a lot in his career. Pacing is tough. It is really tough. It's a thing that it's a thing that definitely can be tricky, and it's where you can be flexible as a DM. Try to be flexible. If you say this is happening and something throws that off, then you kind of find a way to bend or find a way to do things there. I mean, obviously there's a sense of urgency, but if you're so rigid that no matter what they do, they're going to lose it, you're going to have some frustrated players in your hands.
always try to say yes, but
Mm-hmm.
and no, but you can.
Mm-hmm.
Those are always really powerful tools.
Yeah.
Yes, and no, but. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
That's how they go. Those are really powerful tools to use
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes your players show up with a ridiculous idea and you have to
Mm-hmm.
go, no, but you could do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just had a conversation with somebody just yesterday and even part of today where it's like the idea wasn't working. Like no, yes, you can do that, but this will be the consequences. Or yes, and this will be uh, an issue. Um, or eventually just kind of came into no, let's not do that, but let's go a different route instead.
And likewise, if they do present a choice in your game that's going to cause a problem, especially like a role playing game issue, let them know and be very clear about that ahead of time. Um, had a friend who was very imaginative, came up with a really great world. Unfortunately, does not follow the advice of just keep running it even if it burns. But his drow in that world, dark elves, were basically the Huns. You could tell with the
Mhm.
Hun, but he wasn't very clear about how everybody feels about them. So when two
Yeah,
players showed up wanting to play drow, he's like, "Yeah, of course you can play them." And then they just got treated like shit everywhere they went.
yeah,
And
Eh,
it was just like they're like, "We don't want to play these. This isn't fun. This isn't
yeah,
what we signed up for." We need to be
right,
session zero. Be very clear. And if something's
yeah.
going to be a problem, also be like, "Hey, you can do that, but
But this is the
we're going to run
situation
it
there.
through."
So
Yeah.
exactly, because yeah, it was it threw a whole difficult dynamic into the game, and it made things not fun for the players and awkward for everyone else at the table. So yeah, it's being clear about that, being flexible about it. Like say, hey, yes, this is here, but since you're really interested in playing this, let's tweak this a little bit or dial this back a bit so it's not quite as much of a problem.
Right. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you guys for watching. We are pretty much out of time here, but uh, uh, if you're looking for something to read, check out Zach's novel. He will keep you prized on
Amazon,
Amazon.
Kindle
Free space.
Unlimited. You can get it for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. So grease paint.
Excellent.
So it has a killer clown. I mean, that's
Yes.
obvious from the cover.
Yeah. We'll see with the issue with the clowns. I know
Yeah,
there's always
don't read
some
it.
out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but and we'll keep you apprised of situations with whether in the future there, how things are going there. Other projects we work on, we'll keep you all informed here. Want to you know we are planning to take another every the show is every other week, so we'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll be able to, and if you have ideas or questions or things you want to see talked about, definitely throw them my way. As always, love to get some suggestions from you guys over what things you want to see in future episodes. But again, thanks for being here, Zach.
It's always a pleasure. Anytime you want me to come back and talk about anything, clearly I can do it for an hour without a problem. More than happy to talk about that. You know, we've both been running games for a very long time. Different styles of games, but also just, to help people be better DMs, I am always more than happy to do that. So,
Excellent.
Because we are a breed we need more of. So
absolutely. And with that in mind, if you're looking for places to play, if you're looking for places to run, looking for players, come on over to House of Gamers. And we do have a number of campaigns. We have a brand new one starting up real soon, a Starfinder game. That's going to be starting up real soon. I think the days are going to be Sunday evenings, but I'm not sure on that one yet. So exact time here, we have a lot of time zones to deal with too. So we'll have to see how that works out there. But looking for a place, come on over to the House of Gamers. If you want to just hang out and chat, you want to hang out and watch some games, check things out there, absolutely we welcome you to have there. So
I have told Bernie, I have told Jim I will do that whenever he wants.
Yes.
So
I want to do that. So we're going to make that happen. Yeah. So. Okay. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks for being here. We'll be back in 2 weeks for more here. If you want to watch a game on Saturday, Avarice on Saturday at 2:00 Pacific Standard Time. And with that in mind, thanks for hanging out at the tavern. We'll see you again real soon. Take care, everyone.